Alright, so I've been working on a few videos that I want to make that address somewhat of the larger issues that I've been thinking about, and in the process I came across this realization that I thought was fun to share. And this has to do a lot with, again, process and product, right? When I look at being a human being, or the human medium as I like to call it these days, what I see is that there's a process going on, right? You're processing incoming information, and as a result there's an output, right? You could say that you learn things, or you build your ego, you build your persona. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about Anti-Fragility, which, you know, Anti-Fragile is a book written by Nassim Taleb, which is a great book, and I would recommend everyone to read it. And the concept of anti-fragile really has to do with fragility versus anti-fragility, where fragility means something that can only be made less through chaos. So something that can only become less because there's forces interacting with it. Where anti-fragility is this idea where something can only become stronger unless it's killed by the forces that it's interacting with. Basically, to summarize, you could say that what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. And Taleb points out that there's a lot of things, ideas, concepts, animals, everything. I think he's basically saying everything living is anti-fragile. And when I was thinking about this idea of the human medium and the fact that there's a process and a product going on, right? You could say that your mindset and the way you look at life and the way you understand yourself is a living idea. It's a movement, right? You are dealing with an interaction that's non-stop. And the way you deal with it, that's your process. That is an anti-fragile process, meaning you live and you learn. If you pay attention, you become better at that. But the other side of that idea is that if you don't deal with reality, if you don't commit to the process, you start committing to the product of that process. And that product is totally imaginary. It's you, it's ego, it's your idea of your story or of who you are or what's going on. And the interesting thing is that this idea is mostly fragile, especially if it's a negative approach. And I will go into this in greater detail in this video that I've been working on, which looks at the human experience, the human medium, or my perspective on what it means to be a human, explained in logical terms. But what you could say is that the ego is this fantasy of what you are, what you would want to be, what you wish to be. And what you do is you compare this idea with reality a lot. And you could say that that is the point where cognitive dissonance is created. And this ego is a fragile thing, where your mindset or your process is anti-fragile, meaning you interact and you learn as you go. So you pay attention to the incoming feedback. And whenever you get signals that tell you that something is not the way it should be, you don't treat it as an attack on your ego, but you look at it like, maybe I should do something in the process to take this feedback into account, right? It's information for the next action and not something that is wrong. It's not you're not judging it. You're not looking at it and comparing it with something else and then having an opinion about it, right? You're looking at it somewhat in isolation, and that's not true, of course, because nothing is in isolation, but you're looking at it like and saying, okay, if this is what's going on, what does that mean for me? Or what do I want to do with it? Instead of receiving it in the ego side and saying, this is going on, that's not right, or, right, I need to do something. And what you can say is that as you're building ego, it becomes larger and larger. The story becomes bigger and bigger and more intricate. And you need to protect that story, right? If someone says something to you or looks at you in a certain way, you could interpret it as an attack on your story, right? The story is everybody likes me. So I'm walking around thinking everybody likes me, or everybody should like me, or I'm such a likable guy. And all of a sudden somebody looks at me in a way that I think, why is he looking at me like that? He must not like me. Something is amiss. Something is wrong, right? So the ego gets attacked. And the only way the ego can protect itself is to be small, to be tight, to be resisting, right? Because it's fragile. Ego doesn't necessarily, especially if you don't have this realization about mindset and how things work, this ego becomes a structure where your mindset and dealing with information is a process. You're now looking at outcome. if this and this happens, what does that mean below? You know, if I do the calculation, what is the answer to the question? And if I don't like the answer, then something needs to happen. And what I've realized is that this ego is a fragile being, because it can only go one way. It can only become smaller. It can only be attacked. Meaning, you can build it up. You can blow air into your story and make it into something where you're the king of the world. But then there's only one way to go when you start taking in the feedback, and that's down, because you're deluding yourself into what's going on. Plus, you're not in control. So whatever the feedback is what the feedback is. You don't control that. Even if you are the king of the world, right? Somebody might want to challenge you. You don't influence what that person thinks or how he looks at you, right? Haters gonna hate. You don't influence the fact that there are haters that are gonna hate. You only influence how you deal with that incoming information. And so it's very interesting that, right, I'm always thinking about process and product, and I would say that product is a dead thing. It's a dead structure, right? Knowledge, money, outcome, results, they're all dead things that you can't really interact with. What you can interact with is the movement, the thing that's going on, and you can participate in that. And what I realized again is that this process is an anti-fragile process. It becomes stronger through time, especially if you have a positive mindset where you believe that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and you like interacting with that process, and you like getting feedback, and you like even some stress or some edge of your comfort zone stuff. But if you're into the maintaining of a static thing, which is impossible, but we try nonetheless, then you start creating this fragile thing. And that creates cognitive dissonance all the time, but it will also, it's an exercise in futility, right? You will find that it is unattainable, this structure, to maintain this structure, because you're protecting this little fragile thing that whatever's coming at it, the only way to make sure it doesn't get damaged is to protect it completely, which is impossible. So we have our strategies of denial, arguing, pointing fingers, right? All these things. It's just to say, I need to protect this ego, and really there's only one way to go. And it's not completely true, because you could say that you can build up your ego, which would say you would make it bigger and stronger, but that's not true. The bigger an ego, the less strong it really is, because there's more to be influenced, there's more to be touched, right? If I just want to be a likable guy, that's something I can probably maintain for a while, especially if I'm being friendly to people. But if I want to be a likable guy, I want to be extremely intelligent, and I want to be beautiful, right? And all these things that I have, where my ego is telling me that, there's nobody better in the world than myself, then I really, should stay in the house and lock the doors and windows to make sure I can maintain that idea. Because the moment I step outside or go on the internet or whatever, there's going to be interactions that's probably going to tell me that maybe that idea isn't maintainable. So I thought that was an interesting concept to realize that the process is anti-fragile, the product is fragile, ego is something that, you can't, it's not a workable strategy to being happy, right? There's no such thing as being happy. There's this chasing of happiness, I would say. But the process offers way more potential, right? The human process, the processing of incoming feedback and having a good mindset, a good perspective on that, offers way more potential for growth and strength than does this idea of a residue, of a structure, of a thing that is. You can't protect your idea of who you are, but you can protect your idea of what you are, because if you are honest and you get real, then that's just what you are. And then it isn't about protecting the idea, it's about becoming better at it. So you could say that anti-fragility in a conceptual thing is learning, right? All right, I hope this is useful. I will look at the human experience, like I said, in the next few videos. I'm going to make a video about morals as well, because it's really interesting to look at in this human experience. And yeah, I'll talk to you later. See ya.